Welcome to Blender Frenzy, I am Justin. In this video you will learn how to make a black and white transition, a custom transition, using geometry nodes. And geometry nodes is a modifier that can be put on a mesh object, and then you can actually add these little sliders here so you can adjust it on the fly. So we have our transition, which goes from 0 to 1, so that's fully white to fully black, and then we can decrease the number of squares that we see, or increase the number of squares. We can change the range for the fall off. This actually is explained a little bit later, but the fall off, you can see if I decrease this here, it has this effect. If I increase it here, it has a very short fall off. And then of course you can always change the speed of it by scaling out the keyframes, so then it goes a little bit more slowly. So using the custom sliders, we will create 3 different types of transitions, going from the most simple, then to making it a little bit more interesting, and just tweaking stuff to making a different look. And each of those we will demonstrate on transitioning between videos using the video sequence editor. And you will have something that looks like this. Have one video here, and then it will use the simple transition, and then the more complex transitions as we tweak. So that's what, when you apply the black and white transition mask, that's what effect you will see when you apply it to your videos or images in the video sequence editor. So when you're ready, let's get started. Okay, let's open up a new instance of Blender. I'm using 4.5.1 LTS at the time of this recording. And then we can just go to Geometry Nodes workspace here. And I'm going to just collapse this one into this area, because we're not going to need it, and just adjust this here. I'm actually not going to need the light, so I'm going to select the light and just delete that. And then we can select our cube and then click New. And now we have a new Geometry Nodes modifier. Now the way this works is that Geometry Nodes is a modifier, just like any other modifier that you would add that would modify or alter what you see here in our cube, any geometry that you see here. Now we just have the geometry going from input to output now, so nothing has changed. But if you want to think about it like this, you have the cube that has a modifier, geometry node, so you bounce over here and then you bounce down to here. This is the cube input and it's being put into the output. So if I disconnect it from the output, then you don't see it here. And if I change the input with something like, if you do Shift A, you can add in stuff. You can do mesh and then primitives and then add in a grid. Alternatively, you can actually just Shift A and go up to search and type grid, and then you should find it right there. And now if we take this mesh and plug it in here, now we have a grid instead, or a plane. So if I press 7 on the numpad, I can go up to top mode. And if I scroll in a little bit, you can see this is what we have. I'm also going to come to the overlays, and under geometry, click wireframe. So we can see the subdivisions that we have. So this is what our grid looks like now. So the size is 1 by 1 meter, and the vertices on the X are 3, so 1, 2, 3, and the vertices on the Y are 3, so 1, 2, 3, which is why you have these edges going across like that. Now I'm going to make the size a little bit bigger. I'm just going to click and drag in both of these and type 10. And then scroll out with my mouse wheel. So now it's 10 meters by 10 meters. And then our vertices, I can click and drag down and then drag to the left or right to add more subdivisions. As you can see here, it gets more resolution, essentially, more geometry, and then less geometry as we go. So I'm just going to type in 10 to start with. And the cool thing about geometry nodes is that we can take these sockets here and plug them into the input and have access to them out here. So the vertices on the X, I can click this slider and we can change that. Same thing for the Y, like that. And then we can change these at the same time, just like we did here. But I always want these to be the same as each other, so I'm actually going to disconnect this one and then take both of these and plug them into this one. That way here, it will change both of them at the same time. And the way we have access to these, so we want to delete this one and rename this. We can hover over here, press N to open up our properties. On the Group tab, we can scroll down to our group sockets. Now, in previous versions of Blender, the group input and the group output sockets were separated. So one was up here and the other one was way down here. So if you're using an older version of Blender, just keep that in mind. The way you tell the difference now is by the position of these little sockets here. So this geometry and these vertices are inputs when they start to the left of the word. And then when they are on the right of the word, they are the output. As you can see, this geometry right here is an output node. So I am going to take this one and click the minus button to remove that. And then double click here and rename this one to number of squares, or whatever you want to name it as. And then up here we can see, well, that's the number of squares, and then we have more squares or less squares, like that. So it's really nice that we can control that from here. So I'm going to press N to close that again, and then scroll out a little bit. We want to add some more nodes here so we can get our transition going. So the first thing I'm going to add, so Shift A, you can also add stuff by going up here, like this, but then if you do this, you can't really search. So I like to do Shift A, and then we're going to search for separate geometry. And we're going to plug that right in here. It should connect them automatically like this. And then we're going to tell Blender what we want to separate by this selection here. And we can actually click and drag this out and let go, and then we can search for something this way. And we're going to search for a position node. Okay, this is just telling Blender the position of different things. Right now it's not doing anything because we have to add a math node in here to tell it how to move the position. So right now position is going to be right down here. On the grid it's on the far left bottom corner. And then when we add a math node, it's going to move from here up this way. So let's do that. Hover over here, press Shift A, and this time we're going to add in, we can actually just type add. So we get utilities math add is what we want. And then we can put that right in here. And you can see it's already starting to work. Now the value is 0.5 because now it's half of our geometry. And if we click and drag here, the further up we go, the more squares are revealed. And the further down we go, the fewer squares are revealed. And so this is going to be the base of our transition. But you can see at some points we have edges, but we don't have the faces. We don't want that. And the reason it's like that is because we have this point here. So we just need to change this to face. And now it will only remove or separate those faces. Just like that. And what I'm going to do instead here is I'm going to change this position to the bottom just so that we have a little bit more access to other nodes here. And we have the same exact thing. It's going to be this same slider here. But we're going to do the same thing and connect this value into the group input. And now we have this here. So let's go ahead and rename that. Hover over here, press N, and we're going to double click. I'm just going to type in transition. Now, you can see if I go all the way to when all the squares are visible, it's about 3. And then when all the squares are not visible, it's about -3. Now this is going to change depending on the size and the number of squares. So if I crank this up, you can see that -3 doesn't really help if there's 156 squares. It doesn't quite get rid of all of it. But it kind of goes up to, maybe -5 and then +5. Well, even 3.3. But again, the higher you go, the more you're going to have to go. But it doesn't look like it's going to go above 4, at least for our purposes here, because this is quite a few squares. So we don't want this many. So let's go back down to 10. But I don't want this number to be -3 to +3. I want it to be 0 to 1. So this would be 0, and then this would be 1. So let's change that by adding a map range node and plugging it in between here. And so what we want to do is we want to change, and I always forget which one to change first. I think it's this one. So it's going to be 0 to, no, it's going to be -3, right, to +3. okay, and then from 0 to 1. So I'm just going to put this at 0 now. Okay, that's good. And then 1, there we go. Okay, so when it hits 1, then it's fully there, and when it hits 0, it's fully invisible. Now, this doesn't stop at 0 and 1, but we can change that by coming up to our group tab here again and clicking transition and then setting the minimum and the maximum. So here I can set this to 0 and the maximum to 1. So it will always be between 0 and 1. Now, remember, if we add more squares, then this isn't going to be enough. So I'm going to do a minimum of -5 and positive of 5 instead. That's going to give us our 0 to 1 range for most of the numbers that we might want to add for the squares. Perfect. So essentially, this is the basis of our transition. We are going to embellish it a little bit more after this, but let's see what it looks like now. Let's go to Material Preview mode. Now this isn't quite white, which we need it to be fully white. So to do that, let's go to the Render tab, scroll all the way down to Color Management, and make sure this is sRGB and Standard. So now this is fully white. To see this easier, let's turn off the overlays, and now we have a fully white square. If we go back to our modifiers, and then we have our options here, our transition, 1 and then 0, this is what it looks like. So it's a very simple swipe transition. But let's go ahead and start with this for our first transition. So we just need to make an animation, and on the first frame here, if we pull up our timeline here, make sure you're on the first frame, and we want to add a keyframe to our transition, which is right here, animate the property, and now we have a keyframe. So let's just go 30 frames. I don't entirely know what length I will like yet, but we'll just go 30 and then set another keyframe at 0. Now if we scrub through the timeline, you can see it goes from 1 to 0. If we play it, you can see that is our transition. Now if we zoom in here with our scroll wheel and middle mouse to drag so we can just see this a little bit better, the first few frames, nothing happens. And I believe that is because we have set this to -5 and 5. If we put this back down to -3 and 3, then I believe it's going to start sooner. It does start a little bit sooner there and end a little bit sooner. Another reason why is probably because we have a curve. And I'm not going to show you all of that now, but to change this, we're going to hover over the timeline, press A to select all of our keyframes, press T, and then choose linear, because we don't want a curve, we want it to be linear motion. So that means on the first frame, and then on the second, something changes, all the way until frame 29 and then 30. So it's just a very linear motion. And I can actually take the last one, and you might have to click. So if you click out to deselect all of them, and then click this one, just so you're not moving both of them. You can pull this one in to make it go a little bit faster, just like that. I think that's good. So from 1 to 20, and then we can end our timeline at frame 20 so that it just keeps going like that. Okay, so this would be our transition. But because we have to change this depending on how many squares that we have, like for example like this, it's not going to be enough. We might want to add these to our input, so we have that option over here as well. But I don't want two options. I don't want to have to change -3 and +3. So what we're going to do instead is plug both of these in to the same one. Now they're both -3, but we don't want both of these to be -3. We want one of them to be -3 and one of them to be +3. So to do that, all we have to do is add another math node. So I'm just going to take this one, Shift D to duplicate that. We're going to plug it in if we can right here. That says 2 minimum. And let's actually make some room here so that we can have room for everything on the screen. And for the 2 minimum, we're just going to say multiply this by -1. So that way, when we have 3, this number, if you hover over the value socket, it has -3, And if you hover over this value socket, this is +3. So +3 straight away goes into the maximum, and -3 goes into the minimum. So with one slider, we can change that amount. Okay, so let's change this to min. Let's say the range. We'll call this range. Actually, it's down here. Let's go to min. We'll double click, say range. So our range, all we have to do is at 0. Just looking at, well, let's go, I guess this is 1 and this is 0. So let's do it 1. So at 1, we want this to be fully formed. So we just kind of see what number that's going to be. There we go. We can just keep it at 3.2, and then that should be the same for all the way at the end where everything is invisible. Perfect. So that's just another thing that we can adjust, and we don't need to add any keyframes on here unless we wanted to, but there's no reason. The transition is good enough for our keyframes for our transition. So let's do this. Let's take the transition, and we can actually just move it up a little bit. So let's just take this. Oh, I think it's click and drag now. So we just click and drag that before the number of squares. So that's the first thing that we have here. And then the number of squares and the range affect everything else. So let's go back to the beginning, frame 1, set the number of squares back down to 10, and then we can see whether or not 3.2 is going to be enough for, and it does look like that. So 3.2 is enough for all of that to work the same. So now we can see this in real time if we press play with spacebar, and I can just change the number of squares in real time, just like this. So we can do 1, 4, 8, 23, 43, and so on. So let's start with 10 here again and go back to 1. Let's get our camera set up so we can render this out as an image sequence. So let's go to View, Align View, and Center View to Cursor, just so that the preview that we have is centered to the cursor. Also make sure we are in top mode, which is numpad 7, or where you can see the Z axis in the middle here. Then make sure we have a camera, which we do. If you don't have a camera, if you accidentally deleted it, just go Add and then Camera. So press Control-Alt-0 to make the camera the position of our preview perspective. And right now we are in camera perspective mode. We actually don't want perspective. We want orthographic, which is 2-dimensional. So let's click our camera and then go to our camera tab. Choose orthographic for the type, and then we can choose the orthographic scale. If we start to scale this, what we want to do is try to align the sides as best we can. Right now it's 9.9, so I guess it's going to be 10 as far as the orthographic scale, and it is. And I think what this is doing is it's matching. Oh, we've got to click this. If you want to make sure that the geometry node always stays here, just make sure you click your cube, because remember that's how it started. Click pin and we pin this. So no matter if we have our camera selected or our cube selected, we still see our geometry nodes. But I think the reason why the orthographic scale is 10 is because we have the size of 10 meters here for our grid. So there we go, we have that all set up. Let's click our cube again and then go back here. Oh, actually we don't need to click and drag because we've already created our keyframes. So let's scroll in a little bit here like this, press play, and now we can see what that looks like. Let's turn our overlays off. And this is almost done. You know, we can also make this less fast by dragging this over to 30 again, changing the end frame to 30, and just seeing what that looks like. So that's probably a little bit better speed, actually, back on that 30. But transitions are an alpha mask between black and white. And right now we don't have black and white. We have kind of this gray in the background and white. Now this is going to depend on whether or not you're in material preview mode or you're in rendered mode. Material preview mode in Eevee is going to be the same as the rendered mode in Eevee. And it is not, because what I did actually forget to do is we need to change our material, or actually adjust or add a material to this. So that's something that I did forget to do. So let's go to the material tab down here. Now we have a principled BSDF, which is a material that receives light and light bounces. Well, we deleted our light, so we don't have any light bounces, aside from the world atmosphere. So that's why it is still a little bit of a gray. But we don't want this. We want to change this to emission, and the color, just make sure that's completely white. Now let's rename this white. Now it hasn't applied it yet, because remember the geometry nodes is a modifier, and so everything here was deleted, and then we add everything back in here. So in order to add a material here, we need to add in a set material node, place it right here, right at the end, and then in here we can now select our newly created white material, and ta-da! But again, we have white and we need black here. White is completely opaque and black is completely invisible. So we're going from a completely visible image to a completely invisible image. And so just to demonstrate this, again, we're in the Eevee render engine. So going back and forth between these two right now are exactly the same. So I'm going to stay in material preview because I like that better. And this gray here represents, if I middle mouse and click and drag and move this, we're out in the 3D preview now. This just represents the world atmosphere. And we can change the world atmosphere by coming to the world properties, and then we can either change the strength all the way down to 0 or the color. I'm going to change the strength to 0. Now it doesn't change anything here because in material preview we have to do an extra step. You can go to rendered mode if you want, but if you're in material preview mode you have to come to this drop down and choose scene world, and possibly scene lights depending on if you have any lights, but we don't. So now we have completely black atmosphere and completely white grid. So press 0 to go back into camera mode, and now this is what we have here. Now you can still see, if I scroll out, you can still see all of the other squares outside of the camera mode, and that's because if we click our camera, go to our camera properties, viewport display, we have this Passipar 2, which is how transparent everything around the camera is. So let's crank this up to 1, and then we can only see what the camera sees. And this is our initial transition. So we can let's go ahead and save it. And then let's come to our rendering workspace and press F12 to make sure that we actually are rendering what we want, which we are. If you have a separate window pop up, just make sure to go to Edit, Preferences, Interface, and Temporary Editors, Render and Keep User Interface. I like this, but you can choose whichever one you want here. But if you don't see this, if you see something else, either gray or black completely, just make sure to come over to your Output tab, all the way down to Post-Processing, and uncheck both of these, because we're not using either of those. And then we can try that again, press F12. That will force it to render stuff through the camera. So you're going to need to make sure that you actually have a camera and that it's pointing in the correct direction. You also want to make sure that it's not all the way at frame 30, which that's the black images. And you can kind of see here we have a couple of extra frames that have complete black, probably at the beginning as well too. And that's just, again, because outside, if I press 7, you can see outside, this is outside of the camera. Here's our camera. So it does actually start in the corner down there, but that's outside of our camera. Now to fix that, we could either move our camera, or what I'm going to do actually is just adjust the timeline to start and end where these start and end. So this is where it first enters the camera. Actually, we can just go in there and see. Here we go. It's entered the camera. So we're going to start at 6. So I can just hover over here, press Control C to copy, Control V to paste. And then when it finally is out of the frame for the first time is on 28. Copy, paste that there. Now we have our true frame range, which is what we're going to go ahead and render out. And actually, I'm going to go back 1 so that we have it full here as on 5. So I'm just going to go back 1 on 5 like that. Okay, here is our transition. So let's go to the beginning. Let's save it. Let's make sure in our rendering tab at different points in time on our timeline, we have the correct render result showing up. Okay, so here, I'm glad I did this. See, at 5, we have this black sliver here. I'm going to go to 4 and make that the starting and press F12 just to make sure we have fully white. And we still don't. Let's actually go back to our geometry nodes. Zoom in. To pan, you can press and hold Shift and then middle mouse, and then we can zoom in here. And where does that disappear? So that disappears on 3. So we're actually going to start at 3, like that. And this is why it's a good idea to kind of test a couple frames with F12 before we start. So then we can do 7. Okay. Let's see. Let's go in the middle. See what that looks like. At the end. Okay. 27 and then 28. Okay, perfect. So we got fully white to fully black, and we've got a couple of them in between that we tested. Perfect. So let's save it. Let's go to the beginning. Let's do a double / here, enter. This is going to make it easier for when we click this button to open. It goes right into our blend file. I'm just going to go up, create a new one called image sequence, and then in here, I like to store all my image sequences. Since we're going to create a couple of them, I'm going to create a new one now, IMSQ. Again, you can name this however you want. This is just my own naming convention. Custom Tran 01. And then double click there, and we're going to call this Custom Tran 01. And then another underscore, enter, enter. And you can see that information is now over here. And this is where it's going to save the image sequence out. And the reason I have the underscore is because I have this file extensions checked. And what that will do is we'll add the frame number along with the file extension of whatever file format we have here, which right now it's PNG. I'm actually going to choose JPEG and then 100% RGB. Well, in this case, we could say black and white. It doesn't really matter because it is actually black or white. I'm going to uncheck overwrite for now. You can always, if you want to adjust and change your image sequence because you've messed up, you can always click overwrite, and then it will overwrite everything you have in that sequence in that folder. But now we should be ready to go. I'm going to save it again. And this time I'm going to press Control F12, or if we come up to render, you can see render animation is this one. And we can watch it go through. And it's going to be rendering it all of those out into our custom transition folder like this here. And you can see it has done that. And you can see it's added the frame number along with the extension. So now let's go back here and open up a video editing workspace. And I'm going to collapse this because I don't need that. Let's scroll in here, and actually if I press 0, it will center the timeline cursor, and we can scroll in this way, middle mouse to move this. And we can add in an image sequence, navigate to our custom transition. I don't want it to start at 25, so this is sorted by date modified right now. I want to sort it by name, so it's counting up from 3 to 28. Then we can press A, select all of those, and then add image strip. Now you can see in our little strip preview down here, exactly that. And so we can just see our transition. So we've only imported our transition now, but what does this do for us? We just see black and white pixels. Well, we can use this to transition between 2 images or 2 movies. Okay, so I have 2 videos here, and let's scroll out here. Let's come over here and let's just crank up the end. And let's just see what we have. I'm just going to move this here, and let's say we're watching this, and this is nice, and then we want to transition into this new scene right here, or this new shot. Because we're going from fully white to fully black, we actually need to apply it to the one that we see first. So this is fully white, meaning it's fully opaque or fully visible. So let's just say we want to start the transition. Let's say we play it here. Let's say we want to start the transition right here. So I'm going to snap the strip here. And let's take our transition and we'll put it right here as well. And the placement of this doesn't really matter all that much. It just needs to start where we want it to start. So it could be on the top, it could be on the bottom, it doesn't really matter. And it also doesn't need to be visible. So I'm going to press H to hide this transition. Then I'm going to take the end handle, click and drag, and we're going to snap it to the end here. If you don't have snapping enabled, that button is right here. So if I scroll in and adjust this here, now with the turtle footage selected, this strip here, we can come to modifiers, and if you don't see this, press N on the keyboard to open up the properties. Go to the modifiers tab, add mask, and we want a strip mask, so select that, and then we can select the strip, which is our custom transition image sequence. And now you can see it being applied. And if we scrub through the timeline, you can see here is our transition from one video to the other. And this can be done with videos or images. Okay, so that is the basic custom transition. This is how you do it from start to finish, but this one is a little bit boring. So what we can do is add a few more nodes to spice it up a little bit. And actually, we only need 2 more nodes here. So the first node we're going to add is a split edges node. Put that right here. Let's take, where's our timeline here? We have our camera selected and our cube. There we go. That's why I couldn't see the keyframes. There we go. We've got this. Oh, right. We changed the end because I think it was 28 there. So we'll just put 28 here. There we go. And we had changed the end because of the video editing here. But yeah, so split edges, and we go to the first frame. And you can't see anything really happening right now, but if we add in one more node and do scale elements, and we scale them, you can see each of those squares that were separated scale in on their individual axes. And so if we just press play, this gives kind of a fun little transition, but it's not really a transition unless we also scaled this. So if we scaled this first and then transitioned like this, which you could do, and you know how to do that, we would just take the scale and plop it in here to a group input, and then we would have that scale, and then we could animate this as well. So we could animate this at 1, and then maybe at 15, we could, scale it down a little bit like, actually, no, maybe all the way at the end, we could scale it to where they weren't so large. So scale that down to like maybe right here. So something like that. So then we have this, which actually is a pretty cool transition as well. In fact, I'm going to save this as well. This is not the initial end result that I was actually going for, but I like this. So we're just going to go ahead and save it. I'm going to render this one out. Again, just pressing F12 on the different frames to make sure that it is doing what we want it to do, which it looks like it. But this time I'm going to save this in another folder. Actually, I'm going to press F2 on this one so I can copy that quick. And then F2 on this one and paste it and just do 2. Double click 2 and then change this to 2. There we go. Okay, so now I can go to the front and save and Control F12. And we're going to make one like that. Perfect. And then we go back here, and the one that I was going to go for is going to be based on the position the same way that our original corner swipe here is based on. So instead of putting the scale here, which we can just go down here and delete, I can actually take the add value and put it on the scale. And now when we do this, you can see it starts to scale out with that. But we can duplicate this, and we can add or subtract, make different effects which is kind of a little bit psychedelic there. Negative for adding, or we can just let's see, can we do a multiply? Maybe that would look better. Yeah, so something like that. But I want to start it like this. Okay. And let's actually see what it looks like with the range being different. Nope, not the range, the number of squares. So yeah, we can change that to be like that. But if I change this to like a 0.4, then we have something that looks like this. Of course, then this is where I think we would change the range here, like that. And there we go. And now we have something even different. So I really like this. We're gonna have it be like this. Maybe, let's see, do I want to keep it like this, or do I want to adjust the value here? See, actually, let's go ahead and plug this in. And what will we call this? We'll call this fall off. So the fall off amount, we can increase or decrease that. And I think I'm going to do something like this. Yeah. Okay. So same thing. Let's save it. Go to our rendering. Just do a couple here to make sure this is correct. Looks good enough to me. Name this custom transition 3, and then we're going to copy this, and it's custom transition 3, accept, save it, and Control F12. So now we have all of our custom transitions. Here's our second one. And here's our third one. And you can see that just with this simple little setup, we were able to quickly make 3 different types of transitions that are fairly interesting. Well, the first one is kind of boring, but let's go ahead and apply the second 2. Our transition 2 here, so 3 to 28 is right. So add image strip there. And so I've just duplicated the videos and moved them around a bit just so I can demonstrate these next transitions, so that the transition is right above where it's going to be transitioning from this one to this one, just like we did here. And then we're going to hide this, and then we're going to apply the custom transition to this strip. Go to the Modifiers tab, add Mask, and choose Custom Transition 2. So now we have what we made the second. And that's a little bit more interesting. And then just do the same exact thing for the third transition, and then we can see what we have all together. And we can go to start and press play, and we can watch our transitions transitioning between. So there's our simple one, and then we have this video, and then we have that the second one, and then the third one. And that is how you add transitions into the VSE using geometry nodes as a starting point to build a base transition. And once you kind of get familiar with geometry nodes and the things that it can do, then you will start to be able to tweak stuff. Like you just need a few nodes here, so this is not too bad. And then you've got a couple of things that you can tweak to make it look, even different. You can kind of see the process here, but geometry nodes gives you lots of power to be able to create a whole bunch of different things, especially for transitions. So this is going to be your first introduction to transitions using geometry nodes. In the next few videos, I'm going to show you even more powerful ways to create different transitions and different ideas that you can use to have more control and be as creative as you like. So stay tuned, and you will see me in the next one.